When we get to the yard, we're ready to do big things. From the job site to the ballpark, we come together and gear up with pride. Ready to perfect our craft and dare to be great. Strauss High Performance Workwear is proud to partner with Major League Baseball, celebrating the preparation and dedication it takes to safely get the job done. Because whether you're on the field or in the field, your gear is a source of pride. Strauss and Major League Baseball. Gear up, go yard.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to Feedstuffs 365. I'm Sarah Muirhead, and back with us today with a long-term weather forecast is Greg Soulje. Welcome, Greg. Great to have you back with us here today.
Well, thank you kindly there, Sarah. Always nice to get together with you and one and all on these longer editions, our live streams here. We'll certainly take a look at things in the short term, the medium range. Not much of a change in the thinking going forward for the rest of the harvest and fall season, and the official winter forecast is ready and set and going here as we get deeper into the broadcast here. So we'll cover all that over the next 30 minutes.
Very good. A little look at what's left for this autumn and then a look at what's ahead for this winter. Always great to have that insight. Before we get going, we want to recognize our weather segment sponsor, Strauss. Strauss Workwear is a family-owned global company in its third generation that designs and manufactures technical workwear and footwear for farmers, builders, and craftsmen. It's a tool you wear. Well, Greg, let's go ahead and have your slides up and have you give us an update.
Okay, and we'll certainly do just that, and off and running with sort of the current satellite picture across the United States, and kind of bring things into a position where they lie. And it is certainly dampish afternoons worth of weather over some areas of the western Corn Belt. We've had a little shower activity through parts of Wisconsin, northern Illinois, and certainly a long way to go to get significant dryness and drought improvement into the picture here. If you try, you can tell I'm in broadcasting, can't you? Into the picture and get a good subsoil recharge going as well. But in any event, we'll touch on all that going forward. But kind of a dingy looking, cool, cloudy afternoon into the northern plains, some of those livestock areas through the Canadian prairie, the uppermost Midwest are in the upper 30s and 40s right now. Meanwhile, in kind of the nose of warm air returning in a powerful upper storm across the western states, we've got some showers and thunderstorms breaking out into parts of Montana and Wyoming at the current time. And it's this atmospheric setup. You can kind of see the hashed red lines. Those are the steering currents. You can see a big old low. That is almost a mid-January type of winter storm relative to mid-October across the western states. And it is delivering some warm air back northward. We'll get into some of that across the plains and Corn Belt locales that are already pushing the 90-degree mark under that H. That's the summertime heat ridge, still holding on for dear life out of the southern plains. You can still see a little curl to the wind currents across the western Atlantic and the Gulf Stream. And out there, that's kind of the remnants of where there was this hybrid subtropical nor'easter that came through that part of the country with some high seas and surf. So the middle part of the country, kind of November-ish to the north, and still more or less in an August feel as you get into the southern plains. And that Pacific weather system, the one across the west, will have with it yesterday morning. Well, they had some heavy rain in Southern California around LA, the Imperial Valley, San Joaquin Valley, be a couple of thunderstorms and lowering snow levels and lowering temperatures as well for some of these livestock operations that are the high plains areas of Montana, Wyoming, and Colorado. Don't be caught with lowering snow levels to probably 5,000 or 6,000 feet. I'm sure that's above most of the grazing areas, but there's certainly a chillier, moisture-laden pattern of rain and higher elevation snow across the western states going forward. There's the surface map from during the late morning hours. You can see cool high pressure west of Sault Ste. Marie. There's kind of a straggly little stationary boundary that runs from the Nebraska Panhandle down into the Southern Appalachian Trail north of there. A little more typical October, almost November feel as you go northward into the upper Great Lakes region. Still summertime, southern plains, far southwestern Corn Belt or Mississippi Valley. And you can see that weather system coming out of the Lost Wages area of Nevada and Utah around Salt Lake City, trailing on southward. under that circulation. Again, showers and thunderstorms on the increase. Can't rule out a couple of dust storms as well getting going in the southwest later on this afternoon. There is the afternoon and evening look at the maps and charts. There may be a couple of sprinkles into parts of North Illinois, a couple of showers into parts of eastern Iowa, a couple of thunderstorms as you get out towards the Coram Palace Sioux Empire region as some of that 80-plus degree air overruns this retreating cool 50 and 60 degree air across parts of the Midwest and the western Corn Belt locales. Otherwise, just warm and dry opportunities for fall harvest or maybe some sense of winter crop planting operations across the eastern Gulf Coast area. The rainy season has wound down across Florida, thank goodness. I'm hearing about, got it from both ends of the direction here of the snowbirds who run down to Florida this time of the year. And they have been complaining about too much wet weather, but the drought is over with down there. Good news. In any event, drought relief in store for the western Dakotas, Montana, Wyoming, as showers and thunderstorms. And yeah, a couple of thunderstorms will get going out there across the northern high plains areas. Some rain too for areas of the southwest high plains, New Mexico into Texas and west of the Oklahoma Panhandle area. And then by tomorrow morning, we can see that shift from green to blue, lowering snow levels between about 5,000 and 7,000 feet, depending on your location and proximity to like the Snake River Valley, parts of the northern Rockies, back down into the high plains areas of Wyoming. So heads up there with livestock operations in mind. Some good soaking rains. The really one of two areas are going to materialize in the next 48 hours. Drier patches and pockets. Any areas in the maybe northernmost winter wheat belt will get some significant moisture, and probably the need for some moisture too on some of these winter wheat fields that have been either newly sown or have emerged onto the central and southern plains, and we will get into that during the course of Friday into Saturday. And the wet weather, unsettled weather continues on through the Great Lakes region, northern and central areas of the plains, big sky country, pretty quiet weather picture for a continuation of harvest operations. Unfortunately, with the kind of USDA shutdown and everything that's going on, we don't have any specific numbers as it applies to winter wheat planting or crop harvest on the corn and soybean side of things, other than what our friends in Danville and Champaign, Illinois radio colleagues have been reporting in, and they are just about ready to wrap it up for the season down there. Or soil moisture shortages, which have been profound, but improving in the Pacific Northwest and across a good part of the eastern through southern Corn Belt locales. It's that juggling act every time of the year, harvest versus moisture recharge. And we'll get into a couple of showers and thunderstorms. Probably the vanguard will turn out to be a pretty good covering of moisture for Kansas, Oklahoma, Missouri, the far southern and southwestern Corn Belt locales, the I-70 corridor southward between Friday and Saturday. And we'll take a look at some of those precip totals as well. So in the next couple of days, the next 48 hours, Nebraska, the Dakotas, Montana, largely rain along the divide above about 6,000 feet. That'll be a wet snow, and everything else from about the Board of Trade to the east and south in relatively quiet order as it applies to moisture. A couple of stronger storms out across the high plains areas, nothing widespread severe, although probably Friday. Wouldn't be surprised we get into a slight risk area from southern Illinois to parts of Missouri, eastern Oklahoma, and Arkansas. Just a slight risk, and it doesn't matter what time of the year it is. If Mother Nature lines up the steering currents, you're off to the races with severe weather. The next couple of days, the main emphasis of severe weather, as mentioned, roughly either side of I-70 southward, and there may be some 1 to maybe 2-inch rains that come down. Yes, it gets in the way of harvest, fall cleanup, but at least we'll bring soil temperatures down going forward for anhydrous application, and you get some moisture. 1-2 inches of rain in that darker green that you see in that hazardous weather outlook chart for parts of the southern Corn Belt back into the Ozarks and southward. That is a key area. Fair amount of that is in some sense of an extreme drought category right now. So the weather systems are beginning to move. We're getting a more of a west to east orientation, more progressive weather pattern. We're not going to stay in these big windows of opportunity. They're still there, but not quite the sense that we had here going since the start of the harvest season. As the tropics begin to quiet down, one system, Lorenzo in the Atlantic basin, and it'll just meander and peter out, and that's it. And a lot of wind from a west to east orientation will be coming across the western and northern Atlantic. So I don't think there will be a lot cooking. We may get 1 or 2 areas of disturbed weather going forward for the rest of the season, and what's probably going to turn out to be a busted forecast from some of the other services on what was going to be a pretty tough and challenging Atlantic basin tropical season. ain't happening. It's been more busier in the Pacific, and we've been able to train Pacific moisture into some of these systems that have moved through Southern California and the Southwest. So there's been actually some drought improvement there in the southwestern states, parts of the West as well. We even tapped into a little energy from a former typhoon out of the western and northern Pacific that came through the Gulf of Alaska. And that's part of that big low that we saw on the satellite picture out across the western states. So you got a little something down there, once again, offshore of some of the resorts in Old Mexico. Don't think it'll be anything more than just a moisture draw northward with time. Going forward, the next 5 days, here it is. It's kind of a more or less kind of wiggly upper air charted at about 30,000 feet. Systems move along. They don't get locked down in any one position. So we call that a progressive flow, a zonal flow, more west to east oriented. You don't have the real big dips, ups and downs that we see currently. So you get a day and a half of a couple of showers. You may get 2, 3, 4 days of dry time, and you repeat the same process. And temperatures that, generally speaking, going forward, and we'll take a look at the longer range stuff, no big alarms going off. There may be some areas of the plains and Corn Belt that don't get into a significant freeze till well beyond the first week to 10 days of the month of November. So that's kind of late. Some of the landscape guys that I work with complain about that because you need a hardening process, a kind of winding down of temperatures. And if you don't get that, you get these cold air intrusions all at once, and prior to that, it's significant rain. Well, some of the non-established perennials and trees sometimes take a hit the next growing season. In any event, you can see one system through the Pacific Northwest, one across the Corn Belt between Sunday and Monday. On its heels, another fast-moving one. Still, the jet stream winds are in two directions. One through the Gulf of Alaska in that far northwest corner between Tuesday and Wednesday. And then you can see kind of a broad west to east or southwest to northeast flow if you run parallel to those green lines. And they're really positioned overhead and to the north of the heartland. And so that keeps temperatures at or a few degrees above average. No real cool or cold air long-term anticipated as well. So, if you've got opportunities and the need to get things maybe ready to go from at least a livestock protection standpoint, structures, fencing, feed stored for the season, by all means, plenty of opportunity going forward here over the next few weeks, and we'll detail it coming on up. There's the Saturday to Monday weather system making its way from the Corn Belt into the eastern states, back on its heels and increasing south wind flow. Another Pacific system, none of this coming out of the Arctic, none of it coming out of the Gulf. So it's, again, west to east, temperatures in check, moistures in check, nothing out of control. That inch to inch and a half to 2 inch rain that comes through between Friday and Saturday over the southern Corn Belt. Again, you're probably going to have to do the best you can with that moisture, because there's nothing really significant going forward after that here, probably for just about the remainder of the month of October. A couple of systems, but this will be the biggest one going forward for the month of October. There's the next 7 days. You can see, again, a shift into the really worst drought-ridden areas of the Corn Belt. Yes, some harvest delays, but I'm going to just assume that most everyone is well ahead of the 5-year averages, in good shape. Same with winter wheat planting, and time to get some moisture in some of these grounds and fields and pasture lands. It'll be focused over the Arklatex. You can see that corridor, maybe some totals approaching 2 inches in the I-70 to I-64 corridor coming out of southern Illinois, southeast Missouri, and western Kentucky. And again, it's that corridor from Arkansas up through Illinois and east into the northeast of New England that is in the worst drought areas. And you can see some substantial moisture too into Vermont, New Hampshire, and the weather systems continued to take aim at the Pacific Northwest. And that's been an area that was running, I think, about 95% short and very short in soil moisture reserves for a good part of the summer and early autumn season. High temperatures today, delightful. And you can see a kind of a compaction of those readings as you get into the Great Lakes areas. There's a bit of a boundary there, and that's what you kind of get these time of the year, these wide-ranging temperatures over the heartland, but mild and warm, already pushing past 80 on the current temperature out down around St. Louis, and they'll be looking at some 90-degree air as well going forward into parts of the southeastern plains. So mild for the day, Wednesday over the course of the weekend, still above average temperatures, a mix of 60s and 70s when it ought to be in the 50s and 60s. You can see some cooling back into the northern and central plains. And by early next week, Monday to Tuesday into Wednesday, largely 60s and 70s, and no real, again, widespread cold or frost or freeze or end of the growing season, probably in many areas. We had some frost a couple of weeks ago into the eastern Corn Belt areas of Indiana, east central Illinois, and Ohio. I don't even think that's going to be enough to officially call it an end of the growing season. So still a few weeks away before that officially happens. And again, no Arctic air and this very fast ribbon of still, we think, El Nino driven weather systems and a pattern across the northern hemisphere. I know there's talk that we're already into La Nina or a neutral state. We think it's still some semblance of winding down here the next couple of 2 or 3 weeks. El Nino set up. I don't care whatever anybody else says. Anyway, drought in comparison, this is not the current one. This is back in August, August 12th. So here we are, mid-August, and in relatively good shape. Some drier areas since those July rains establishing themselves across areas of Michigan, Indiana, and Ohio. This is the current one as of last week on October 7th. And look at the worsening of it across Missouri, east central Illinois, northeast and eastern Indiana from about Ball State into the Maumee Valley of northwest Ohio, and in around that Mount Washington area through Vermont and New Hampshire down eastern Maine. So some work to be done there. Improvement in central and south Florida because of the lack of any thunderstorm activity under the hot capped atmosphere in the southeastern states. They're hurting now, and no real significant tropical features that came ashore there. Meanwhile, parts of the west improving, parts of the southwest kind of improving, so to speak. A little worsening down through Texas and areas of the Nebraska Panhandle. I think with time we'll make amends in that particular department. So close up on the Midwest, you can see Ohio, Indiana, Illinois, still in the worst of those at least extreme drought weather conditions, or if not that, it's severe. And so these rains coming through the eastern and southern Corn Belt. Yes, if you are a little bit late in getting going a harvest, you'll probably have some delays going forward for a few days, but they will be much needed, appreciated, and should come through in periodic fashion, not come down all at once. You may get 2 to 3 waves that come through between Friday and Saturday out of the areas of the southeastern plains into the Ohio Valley. There's a look at the New England states. Tough conditions across western sections, at least West Virginia, across parts of downeastern Maine into Vermont and New Hampshire as well. So I'm sure those color changes are not going to be all that spectacular, at least in my part of the world here near the Wisconsin line, where the fields are done, the beans are cut, the corn's been harvested. There's nothing out here left. The trees have just been dropping their leaves in yellow fashion. No significant color, unfortunately, because of ongoing dryness and drought here through northeast Illinois. There's the southeastern perspective through Georgia and back into parts of Alabama and Mississippi. Same thing, a mid-Atlantic region, although coastal areas did get a pretty good lashing of wind and rain from that hybrid storm earlier in the week. This is the Fed's outlook, and we bring it up because it's basically on target here. And this is a seasonal outlook they put out, issued it at the end of September. And here we are about 6 weeks into the forecast. It's a 90-day outlook. And yeah, that makes pretty good sense that either ongoing or worsening drought areas from the southern plains into the eastern Corn Belt. We think it's a little bit on the pessimistic side as you get deeper into November, but opportunities, I think, for early harvest, fall cleanup. We can get soil temperatures to cool down, anhydrous, again, get the livestock operations ready to go. Weather should fit the stage for that, but keep an eye on those wildfire, those sparking fires that get going, dried out vegetation, hot engine equipment. We saw that in parts of east central Illinois, Ford County, a couple of weeks ago. Pretty good fires, and I'm sure those have been scattered in some pockets over the plains and Corn Belt areas too. The next is 6 to 10 days from an upper air perspective. These are the winds that carry the bulk of the atmosphere, is situated between about 25 and 30,000 feet and down. So that's why we take a look at this profile. And it is really a zonal flow. It's coming off the Canadian U.S. Rockies. That's usually a milder air mass, no big intrusions of cold air. The cold air and the snow, by the way, are building. So that's why I think it's going to be one of these seasons as we get into December. It's the old other boot end or hoof's going to drop on us in a hurry with no really quick transition. It will be a quick transition, no kind of gradual process going on. So we'll keep an eye on that. But as you look up in that northwestern corner of the panel through the Gulf of Alaska, eastern Siberia, Alaska, the snowpack is already above average there. Temperatures are already below average, and you can see probably 120 mile an hour jet stream wind coming across the far northwestern parts of the Pacific. So we'll keep an eye on that going forward. But in the shorter to medium range of it all, no concern. we'll get into the details on the longer range in just a minute. A little bit overdone on some of the cooling across the divide, but a bit below average there. Look at the continuation. We're practically to Halloween. Nothing too spooky here on the temperature outlook. And there'll be the last of some wet weather over the southeastern states. It's much needed. It is welcome. The northeast and New England, some shower activity across the areas of the northern plains, northern and central Rockies. Going forward out 2 weeks to just about Halloween and the start of November, you can see how those west to east lines or winds shift a little northward. So there's warming going on. There's still that warm to hot high pressure ridge evident, relative to late October, early November. The jet stream winds are strong across the Pacific. The cold air is mounting across Alaska, eastern Siberia. The snows are still coming down there and will be in significant fashion, probably above average there. So we'll keep an eye. That is a cold air, by the way, source. Snow cover, at least cold surfaces, cold air masses like to migrate towards colder surfaces. Snow covered grounds, the best. And so that's why we keep an eye on amending the updating the outlook, long range outlook on where these cold air masses materialize based on, to a certain degree, where snow and more significant snow cover is laid out. But there ain't going to be much to speak of here into the even early days of November, warmth all the way up to the Canadian border and beyond that. And this is what we think is going to give us another big, broad, in our last big, broad window of opportunity. I think the pendulum swing is somewhere between the second and third week of November. But this should give you opportunities across the plains and Corn Belt locales for fall field work and any last harvest duties that you have up your sleeve. So, Sarah, that is the the foundation that we'll take a look at going forward here in the longer range stuff. So any questions from you or anybody?
Yeah, I was just, let's just remind our audience here, if they have any questions, to post there in the chat on your screen or in your social media feed. So got to be something out there people want to talk about, but go ahead and keep it going here on Autumn for us, Greg.
Okay, and don't be bashful. There is no silly questions out there. We're here to answer them as best we can. Don't get me going on global warming, though. That's a whole different scenario, and we'll talk about that later on. Anyway, it's still an El Nino-ish looking, real-time, sensible weather pattern by our estimates and the way we kind of calculate things and what we look at. And we are not a completely model-driven office here. There are ways and means that we learned back in the Earl Finkel days and our days of working in the private weather sector and service. We glance at the models. Yes, absolutely. Can't avoid them. But there are indices and measures that you could forecast off of water temperatures and indices off the northern Atlantic, the Pacific as well. We keep an eye on pressures where typically water temperatures vary in the central Pacific. That's the El Nino, La Nina setup around there. And then we keep an eye above the atmospheric movement of weather systems, the stratosphere. The atmosphere is laid out in layers. The bottommost is the troposphere, tropopause, and then the stratosphere. I know it's a lot of meteorology, but you keep an eye on temperatures there at the polar region on when cold air movement is expected to make its way south of the border. So the rest of October, pretty mild around here. No big alarms going off. We'll get some variation of temperatures, but really the cooler spells, and it's not terribly cold air in the Pacific Northwest into the Northeast and New England as well. And from a moisture standpoint, we're still teetering between normal and for October, mid to late October, normal weekly rainfall totals would fall generally in the quarter to a little less than a half-inch categories. That applies to kind of the mid-latitude areas of the Great Plains and central Corn Belt. So, and there are a couple of more tropical systems. I don't think they're going to make any significant landfall. They may fetch some moisture into the eastern states, and you get a system that comes in, wraps those things up, and you do get some moisture, which will be actually some good news for the Northeast of New England, the eastern states, the far northern areas of the Great Lakes, and back into parts of Big Sky country, a tendency for a little above average moisture there, and probably higher peaks, higher elevations across the Rockies is going to be snow, but a big broad area below average moisture over the plains, the southwestern states, a good chunk of the Corn Belt. So again, you don't want to push it too far with getting things ready to go from a wintertime standpoint and or wrapping up harvest, but Mother Nature certainly serving up a nice big broad window of opportunity. So the November outlook, we think we're kind of into a neutral state. It's not above average. It's not below average. And by the way, when we talk about these water temperatures, it's just a degree and a half, 2 degrees centigrade that trips off the alarm, if you will, the bell that we're going into either a La Nina or El Nino. And it's not like we're tracking, I said this time before, ping pong balls in the atmosphere. It's not like walking into the room, throwing the switch, and boom, we're into the setup. It's a process that the atmosphere has to play catch up with in about a 2 to 4 month time frame. So I know I'm the outlier guy out there, but I still think we're kind of just beginning to get into a neutral state when I think already the feds have the pedal to the metal and we're already in a La Nina setup around here. And if you were to pose that into this particular setup, then it ought to be snowing by now. It ought to be snowing by Halloween. It ought to be snow on the ground over the northern and central plains. We ought to be into cold air intrusions from a sensible weather standpoint. But we don't see it. So this is November's outlook. And yes, there'll be some variation, but as a whole, temperatures are going to average out above, and there'll be probably a 5 to 7 day window of significant warmth still lingering over the southern plains and into the southern Corn Belt locale. So you got a few extra bucks in the ever-growing, fuel bill that you got to pay, the petroleum and all that going into the upcoming winter cold season. And we think there's generally still a pretty good opportunity for a continuation, at least through the first half of November, to get caught up if you happen to be in that mode or complete it with harvest in mind. There's asterisks there in that above average area from the Great Lakes into the Ohio Valley and down through the Mid-South. Probably the second half of the month, I think that's where we start getting a little more frequent moisture gain in some of those moisture totals that may be in a half to 1 inch category for a given week over the second half of the month of November in the Ohio Valley. And again, drought-ridden area. If you get your livestock duties cleaned up and ready to go and stored up and feed and all that, and the heavier equipment put away in the equipment shed, let the moisture come on down. And if it's mild to warm, that'll mean percolation, absorption, and hopefully recharging the subsoil moisture base. And you can see some snow in the Pacific Northwest, Southern Canadian Prairie. So we take amends at that particular part of the country as well, Sarah, with some improvement to their ongoing soil moisture shortages in the Pacific Northwest. So are you strapped in and ready to go for the winter outlook?
Oh, of course. Like to see that we're getting that moisture before our ground freezes here. So
yes,
that's
and I think
important, as you say.
Yeah, and I think that'll be the story, even going into the month of December here. So we get into a pattern shift. We think the first lobes are going to, the upper level winds are too strong, and the steering currents are just going to push these cold air surfaces, air masses into the northern plains, and they'll eventually set up shop over the Great Lakes in the northeast of New England. You can see a pretty good mother load, if you will, of Arctic air. That's up towards Hudson Bay, James Bay. But we're still in this neutral state. It's still kind of a west-northwest wind flow. That's not a big moisture tap, by the way. And warmth continues on over the southwestern reaches of the country. And so we begin to see a little more where you kind of overrun. You have a cold air mass, you overrun it with some mild air up aloft, you squeeze out the moisture, and then you get another cold wedge to come on in, and you try to repeat the process, and it's back and forth. These are not dynamic major winter storms coming through, early winter storms. It's probably just the frequency that'll push some of these totals above average. And yeah, time to get some snow on the ground, and we'll get it going over the northern plains, probably as far south as the Twins and Lambeau Field and into the northeast of New England. Again, opportunities where you get south into the Ohio Valley, be it chilly rain, muddy feedlots, but again, some drought relief, and the southeastern parts of the country as well. Going into January, and we think that the pendulum swing is around the holidays, and there'll be probably a couple of very abrupt cold fronts second half of December towards the holidays to the beginning part of January that lay out this particular scenario. This is probably a good snapshot at the first half of January, and we'll just begin to propagate those cold air masses southward. But anytime you get this compaction and wide-ranging temperatures, probably below zero at night Canadian border, still a hint of at least autumn in the air from readings down in the southern plains, but it usually breeds a very strong jet stream. And now we begin to take on a little more of a winter storm, more of a stormier weather pattern where we'll get intervals of dry time, cold weather in between. We'll try to moderate it, get the system wound up, and move it on through. So from a livestock standpoint, it snows in January. From a moisture gain standpoint, well, this ultimately will play out hopefully quite beneficially so with dryness and drought in mind. But yeah, expect it to snow and get cold in January. But with a little more vim and vigor over the second half of the month of January into February. This should be relatively short-lived, its impact of this sharply colder Arctic air, but it's going to take probably into March and April, i.e. the growing season, the planting season, to fully get out of this. We think we're kind of thinking already wetter, coolish, something along those lines for next springtime planting season. But here's the storm track. It's a moderate, short-lived La Nina. And I'm sorry, you blew right past that. Here's what you get in a storm track sense. Significant moisture, drought relief Pacific Northwest, widespread frequent snow and ice down through the central plains, Corn Belt locales northeast of New England. And despite the February calendar date, that often by at least the second half of February, beginning part of March, starts the severe weather season over Dixie and the southeastern states. So probably key dates, Sarah, would be Thanksgiving, something a little more realistic from a temperature weather standpoint in the northern plains, holidays right at Christmas and New Year's and beyond, where we kind of throw the switch and we go right into winter time. So that's why the thinking is it's not going to be a gradual process. It may be the other boot or a hoof dropping on us or kicking us, and then we get ramped right back up into a stormier weather cycle. I think it'll be more stormy than anything, less systems, but more stormy to contend with when we get into January and February around here. Not unusual, it's wintertime, but considering there'll be a lack of a hardening process, getting accustomed to cold and snow and rain and all that, it may be pretty abrupt on man and beast as we get beyond the holidays and into the new year.
Very good. And of course, we'll be keeping you updated here on Feedstuffs 365. Greg and I get together every Tuesday and Friday, give you kind of that shorter look at the weather. But and then, of course, in the middle of what month? What are we in? In the middle of November, we'll be coming back with a longer term forecast and another look at winter weather and what's ahead. So
and we update this as well on This Week in Agribusiness every week. There is no other TV weather shows, no other ag shows on TV that do this 4-week forecast that has been in existence for some 40 plus, almost 50 years now. And so that's something that you can kind of lean your head on with planning forward. And usually it's the short-term stuff. Farmers, producers got it figured out. It's the longer range stuff that everyone needs help with, and keep a few extra bucks and dollars in your back pocket going forward.
Very good. All right. Well, thank you, Greg. And we'll see you on Friday.
That's right. Take care.
We want to thank all of you for tuning in as well. For Feedstuffs, I'm Sarah Muirhead.